Hello. I haven't shot one of these in a long time. Um, I wasn't really intent on shooting something like this, but today I was having coffee and I was thinking of something that I could do, and I thought maybe I'll just make a video. And so I set my mind on, I didn't set my mind, but rather I put myself in a place where I imagined, what if I were to shoot a video? What would I say? And my first thought was, I have nothing that I would say. There's nothing that I have nothing to say. But then I thought, okay, that's fine that you have nothing to say, Yuichi. But suppose that you were to make a video, what would you make it on? And then it occurred to me, I would make it on something I bought recently. And so that's what this video is about. So I was in Japan in March and early April. And one day, or actually the backstory is that my mom has been making what's called an enikki. E means drawing, nikki means diary. So like a drawing diary where she draws pictures or drawings every day to capture some moment of the day. And so I was at this bookstore and I thought, I'm not going to do an enikki, but maybe I can just start a diary. And so I was looking at diaries and I came across an interesting diary that I'd never come across. I've since discovered that they have them on Amazon also, but it was the first time I saw it. And I happened to find this on March 30th at the bookstore. And in Japan, the school year, as well as the fiscal year, starts on April 1st. So it starts 2 days later. And I came across this diary that starts exactly on April 1st. April 1st. And I thought, oh, in 2 days, how fortuitous. And so I thought, I'll sleep on it. And the next morning or the next day, I went to the bookstore and bought it. And then the following day, I started it. And that was my last full day in Japan. And so far, I've kept it up. I've gone over a month now. I just did May 1st yesterday, and today I'll do May 2nd. But what's interesting about this diary, at least for me, is that it's a 5-year diary. And so the way in which it's formatted is, so for example, if I show you May 2nd, it's May 2nd, 2025. But then a little bit down, it's 2026, all the way to 2000, and in this case, 2029. And so the idea is that for 2025, you're going to write a cross on that first row. It's not really a row, but that first kind of set of rows, the first, I guess, 5 rows. And then once you get to the end, you start back to the first page and you go to the second sort of big row of 2026 and so on. And I was drawn to this. Now, I've been a journaler, not really a diary, but a journaler probably since I was about 19 or maybe 20. And I have stacks and stacks of notebooks and scrap pieces of paper and electronic documents just all over the place. And I have a big giant box full of dust and kind of smells in storage that has probably about 20 years of notebooks and scrap pieces of paper. I also have a big bag of like music I've written and so on. And then, as I said, I have these years and years of electronic documents. I would say for the past 5 to 7 years, I've done it by month. So 01, 2020, 02, 2020, 03, 2020, and so on. And 1 through 12, those files are sitting in a folder called 2020. And there's a folder for 2021, 2022, and so on. What I liked about this concept of a diary is twofold. One is that there's not a lot of space to write every day, so it's not a lot of pressure to write. But more importantly, the reason why I was drawn to this diary is that one of the problems, or may not be a problem, but if you're someone who writes a diary or who journals, is there's not a lot of incentive to go back in time across the years and decades and to read everything. I've disciplined myself to go back, and in fact, I have the summary. I've gone through probably about 10 to 15 years I did this a couple years ago, and I summarized every month. And once I had a summary for every month, I summarized those summaries into a yearly summary, and so on. And then I transferred those summaries into a little notebook that I look at every once in a while. But what I liked about this was how the way it was structured, in that, so for example, so what's been interesting about using this diary is that when I write my entries, I have an audience. Normally when I'm journaling, I don't have an intended audience. Yeah, if I'm writing a book, I have an intended audience. But when I'm journaling or doing a diary, I don't have an audience, because who's going to read my diary? But with this, I do have an intended audience, and that's my future self. The idea, for example, on April 1st, when I started writing, this is April 1st, was that I wanted to write something so that the Yuichi, if I'm still alive, on April 1st of 2026, could read this and recall what April 1st of 2025 was like, and kind of relive the whole year as I continue to write. And then these two Yuichis, these two versions of myself, would be writing toward a future Yuichi in 2027, and so on, all the way to 2029 in this case. And I suppose after 2029, either I'm dead or this journal is now forgotten. So maybe I won't even do 2029, because no one's going to read the 2029. But maybe I'll just read everything. I don't know. But having this built-in audience has been interesting. So now, if one keeps a diary, I think that there's many choices that one can make. There's 1, 2, 3, there's 5 lines to fill. Now, in this case, I filled this top part upside down, and sometimes I don't fill all 5 lines. Like here, I left the bottom line open. But what I've tended to do is I've tended to write little snippets of events that happened, but the focus for the most part has been on what's been my interior state for that day. What have been the big sort of moods or the main attitudes or mental states that I've occupied within that day. And the idea for me is that that's what I want to know in the future. Just as I would want to know that, how was I doing last year? Not so much like, did I ride my bike or did I go to the bank? But it's more, how was I grappling with the challenges and difficulties as well as the joys of living? And so that's been my focus. And the other cool thing about this diary is that, so this is 4:30, and then this is a blank page for May. And it's basically a plan for May. So I suppose one could sit down and sort of plan for May. But what I've done is, once I finished April, well, as I was writing, every 10 days or so, I would read the past 10 days and sort of highlight things that I wanted to remember, like little insights or moments that I didn't want to forget, and so on. And then on April 30th, I read through all my highlights. And looking at my highlights, for example, on one of the days, I was feeling a little bit sort of fragile, vulnerable, maybe weak. And I wasn't sure where to turn to. And in that moment of not knowing where to turn to, I recalled the Dharma. Now, I'm a daily meditator, but I can meditate without consciously invoking and considering the Dharma. But on that day, I happened to remember, I think it's the Sanskrit definition, or it could be Tibetan. So the word Dharma is Sanskrit. It gets translated into another word in Tibetan. So it could be the meaning of the Tibetan word, or it could be the Sanskrit word. But I was taught that one of the meanings for Dharma is that which upholds, that which upholds. And there I was in a state that day where I felt weak, like I needed someone to hold me almost. And then when I thought of the Dharma, I thought, oh, it's the Dharma that upholds. And I sort of turned my mind toward the Dharma and began reflecting on the Dharma. And I would say within 20 minutes, I felt this inner sort of strength. or this solid quality on the inside where I didn't feel this need to lean on somebody or something. Or in fact, I was leaning on the Dharma, or the Dharma was upholding me. And so that was an important moment for me. I mean, it's a thing that's happened many times, because this notion of the Dharma as being that which upholds is an important value in my life. But I had become reacquainted with that experience. I had returned back to the Dharma. I had reestablished relationship. I've said this before, but the root word of relationship is relationem from the Latin, which means to return. So we can say that a relationship is the act of returning. So that was a moment that day where I was returning to the Dharma. In other words, I was in relationship to the Dharma. And so that was an important moment in April. So when I was going back to this one entry to plan for May, I just wrote to myself, for May, one of the things I want to focus on is to turn to the Dharma, that which upholds when feeling lost. Or I just wrote when feeling lost, but I mean like fragile, sort of vulnerable, weak. And there were a couple other, what for me were tangibly important moments or insights that I wanted to carry into May. So I filled this page with these things. So throughout May, my attitude is I'm going to occasionally return to this page and remind myself these are the things that I want to focus on for May as I continue filling in May. So that's this. It's nice, isn't it? I mean, maybe, all 3 to 7 of you who are listening to this already do this or have done this. But and you can go on Amazon and buy one of these 5-year diaries that's structured exactly the same way. Year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. And so I wanted to share that. That's the video. But maybe on another level, what I wanted to share was how interesting it is that I remember when I was about, 25, I was into going to the piano and trying to write songs. And I remember one time I wrote a song that I don't remember the lyrics exactly, but the main line was, I have nothing to say. And I felt that captured me. And what's interesting is, before I thought of talking about this diary, when I thought of making a video, my primary thought was, I have nothing to say. And yet, I've now filled 13 minutes, probably maybe 13 long minutes for you on something that may be not of great interest, but I find it interesting, and I wanted to share that. And so the point is that, to me, the more interesting part is to become reacquainted with this idea that, so for example, when I used to write, I remember when I was working on my dissertation, every morning I had to write something. And I did a lot of reading and so on. Reading, I could just read. It's just about hard work, just sort of grinding through the literature and so on, and thinking. But writing, it was kind of this interesting process. And I remember almost every morning for over a year, I would have the same thought, which is, I can't do this. And yet I would sit there, and within an hour or two, I would have a few sentences. And once I had a few sentences, I would invariably have 1 or 2 paragraphs. And for me, if I had 1 or 2 paragraphs a day, it was a good day. And later on, when I started writing sort of easier books, I would sit there, and most of the time I would have a thought of like, I'm not sure what I want to say. I'm not sure if there's anything to say. And yet, if I sat there long enough, there would be a page of writing in front of me. It's not like it magically appeared. I would be the one writing it, and yet the mind would sort of come up with something to put down on paper. And so I think that that's more interesting than the diary. And it was interesting to become reacquainted with that attitude or that idea or the phenomena of that, and to just go with it. I thought, why am I going to talk about this thing I bought in Japan? But then the more I thought about it, I thought it was interesting because I think there's a lot of value to journaling. I think there's a lot of value to putting pen to paper and keeping track of things that occur on a daily basis and having some way of returning to it. And I think it lends a certain kind of a consciousness. There's a saying I like, I may misquote it, but it's something like this. If you want power, read. If you want accuracy, write. If you want alertness, converse, or something like that. In other words, conversing with real people keeps us on our toes, helps us to be more alert to reality, as opposed to just sitting there reading books or being on Zoom or whatever. But if we want to be more precise in our thinking and more precise in our aim, to have better aim, writing is the thing. So to have a mechanism for writing every day, even if it's 5 lines, I think can be valuable. Just like reading can help us to have, it's a way to gain power. It's because it gives us knowledge. And so to have some mechanism for writing, even 5 lines, such as using a diary like this, I think can be a very invaluable tool in life. I feel like there's more I want to say, but I'll stop this here. I hope everyone's doing well.